Good evening, guys. Tonight I would like to talk about John chapter 21, verse 1 to 14, which is about when Jesus met with the disciples during their fishing trip in the Sea of Galilee, which is now called the Tiberias Sea. But before that, I would like to shoot out a question that is, how many times did Jesus appeared to the disciples before John chapter 21? Any guesses? Even though I can't see you guys. Okay, the answer is uh, two times, but in chapter 21 is three times. Okay, the first one that Jesus met was Mary, and the second one was in John chapter 20 verse 24, when they meet at a house. That was, John did not mention who was there, where he only mentioned that Thomas was there. That Thomas wasn't there. Okay, and on the second time, 8 days later, John still did not mention who was there, but only that Thomas was there. So in this conclusion, that we only know that only a few of them have met Jesus, and also Thomas have met Jesus. Let's start with John chapter 21 verse 1 to 14. After this, Jesus appeared again to the disciples. As I mentioned earlier, this is the third time that Jesus appeared to the disciples, and at this time is at the Tiberias Sea, formerly known as the Sea of Galilee. This is how he did it. Simon Peter, Thomas, also known as Didymus Thomas, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the brothers Zebedee, and two other disciples were together. Simon Peter announced that he is going fishing. Then the rest of them replied, "We're going with you." They went out into the boat. They caught nothing that night. When the sun came up, Jesus was standing on the beach, but they did not recognize him. My question is, why didn't they recognize Jesus? Because I think is that, as I mentioned earlier, that that John did not specifically mention who met Jesus earlier before this. So this is why they didn't recognize him. Jesus spoke to them. "Good morning. Did you catch anything for breakfast?" They answered, "No." He said to them, "Throw the net off the right side of the boat and see what happens." And what do you think they do? If someone asked me to throw the net to the other side, or if I do something and I fail miserably, but if someone asked me to do something, and do you think I would do just to listen to a stranger? I don't think I would do it. But in the story, the disciples do not know who this someone is. Maybe some know and maybe some didn't. So they did what he said, and all of a sudden there were many fishes in it. They weren't strong enough to pull it in. Then the disciple Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Master." Interesting fact that then the disciple Jesus loved is John, because in the Bible it is mentioned that the disciple Jesus loved is John. Okay, said to Peter, "It is the Master." When Simon Peter realized that it was the Master which means Christ, he threw on some clothes for his trip for work, because fishermen sometimes love to go fishing without shirt because it's hot in the sea sometimes. The other disciples came into the boat, for they weren't far from the land, or 100 yards or so, pulling along a net full of fish. When they go out on the boat, they saw a fire lit with fish and bread cooking on it. Jesus said, because now already they know that Jesus is Jesus and Jesus is sitting over there for breakfast. Okay, so bring some of the fish you just caught. Simon Peter joined them and put the net to the shore. 153 big fishes. 153. Wow, can you imagine that? And even with all those fishes, the net didn't trip. Jesus said, breakfast is ready. No one of the disciples dared ask, who are you? Because they already know it was a master. Jesus took the bread and gave it to them. He did it same with the fish. This was the third time Jesus had shown himself to the disciples since being raised from the dead. Okay, so what can we learn from tonight's reading is that even though sometimes we have even though we have faith, we need to believe that it was faith, because in faith faith means believing something will happen even though it's a low chance that it will happen. So chance is chance, but this is faith. As the Bible said, believe in Jesus, because even though we haven't met Jesus before, but we know Jesus in the Bible so that we can know Jesus. As he said to Thomas in John chapter 20, that if you believe without seeing, but you believe anyway, that is good faith. In our current time of the COVID-19 virus, our faith is tested, believe it or not. We face fear, anxiety, worry, and sometimes doubt. This fear robs us of our peace and our joy. Our hearts are somewhat hardened, for we do not know what is going on. Even our faith is shaken. We know that our only hope is in Christ. It is easy to declare and say it out loud, but it is difficult to do. In time of joy and gladness, it is easy to shout out praise, but in time of trouble and uncertainty, it is challenging even to pray. How does this passage affect us? Do we recognize Christ? Do we recognize that He is there in the midst of the lockdown? Do we see that He is working even though we do not see it or feel it? Are we like Thomas, who doubts in the power of Jesus, who doubts the word of Christ that He will come again and that hope is in Him? Or do we stand firm, holding on to that promise of hope that it is in Christ? As Jesus mentioned in John chapter 20, verse 29, so you believe because you've seen Him with your own eyes. Even better blessings are in store for those who believe without seeing. My dear friends, I would like to encourage you to hold on, even though without knowing and seeing what lies ahead. Remember that God is already there. Continue to trust and believe in Him. My last word for tonight is trust in the Lord.